untuk kita semua. Selamat datang di Unika Atma Jaya. Kevin, I'm sorry, I would like to speak in Indonesia to welcome. Okay. Ya, selamat datang di Unika Atma Jaya. Terima kasih sudah menyediakan waktu untuk menghadiri seminar ini yang memang waktunya cukup mendadak begitu ya. Tetapi saya senang beberapa nama sudah mendaftar. Hari ini kita akan menikmati pengetahuan, mendapatkan ilmu baru mengenai teori inteligensi. Beberapa dari kita pernah belajar mengenai inteligensi, tetapi teorinya cukup tua begitu ya. Nah, sekarang kita akan belajar satu teori lagi yang sebetulnya sudah muncul lama, tetapi terus diperbarui dan berkembang, teori CHC. Nanti akan disampaikan oleh narasumber utama kita, Kevin McGrew. Ada dua bagian. Yang pertama tentang teorinya dari jam 9 sampai jam 12, lalu nanti di bagian kedua setelah break makan siang kita akan belajar mengenai alat tes inteligensi yaitu AJT Cognitive Test yang dikembangkan oleh Bapak Abi dan kawan-kawan dan teman-teman dari UGM yang diturunkan dari teori ini. Lalu nanti juga akan ada cerita mengenai alat tes ini sudah siap publish tahun depan dan bisa kita gunakan. Lalu nanti juga ada harapan-harapan kita bisa melakukan beberapa kerjasama penelitian dan juga yang membuat program intervensi bersama sebagai implementasi dari assessment alat tes ini, gitu. Ya, waktu kegiatan kita mulai dari jam sekarang, jam 9 sampai jam 12, nanti kita ada break, makan siang bersama, lalu nanti kita lanjutkan jam 1 sampai jam 3, setelah itu closing. Lalu teman-teman, kalau nanti ada kebutuhan untuk bertanya atau menanggapi, berespon, jika tidak bisa dalam bahasa Inggris, silahkan nanti sampaikan ke kami panitia, Pak Abi akan membantu menerjemahkan ke Kevin, atau nanti kami berikan kertas kecil, jika ada pertanyaan nanti akan kami siapkan dan kirimkan ke Kevin. Waktu saya serahkan ke Kevin untuk tidak lama. This is your time, Kevin, you can present.
Best I can, and I guess I just want to start with telling you that it's an honor to be here. I was sitting over here thinking about my life, actually, about why am I in Indonesia talking about this? Because I didn't start out to do this. When I started, I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I wanted to be an experimental psychologist. I wanted to run rats and animals and do really nice research with really tight controls and gather data and write articles. But I learned you couldn't do much you had to get a PhD to be an experimental psychologist and teach at a university, and I didn't want to do that. So I got a master's degree in school psychology, and that's what I wanted to be the rest of my life. I wanted to go out in the United States. We have school psychologists who go work in the schools to help teachers and parents, and especially the children, do better. And we do a lot of testing, and we do a lot of work in the schools. And I was doing a lot of intelligence testing, and I really enjoyed it, and I found it really fascinating. And I was supposed to do that the rest of my life. That's what I was supposed to do. But I got more and more curious about the tests I was using, and I was learning things that were telling me that the tests I was using were really not that good. And this is a very short story of 40 years of my life. I've been doing this for 40 years. I decided I needed to get my PhD, so I went to the University of Minnesota, and I got my PhD in educational psychology with an emphasis in special education and measurement and evaluation. And from there I decided, well, I'll become a professor. So I went to a university in Minnesota and I became a professor for 10 years, and I taught students, mostly teachers about, who were going to go out and be in the classrooms, all about psychology and testing. And I thought that's where I was going to be the rest of my life. And a whole bunch of things happened that I can't explain within a short period of time, that I eventually got involved with test development with a guy named Dr. Richard Woodcock. And in the United States, there are major intelligence tests. There's the WISC, the Wechslers, there's the Woodcock-Johnson, and there's the Stanford-Binet, and the Kaufman. And I started working with Dr. Woodcock during all that time, and eventually somehow ended up being a co-author on the Woodcock-Johnson 3rd edition and the Woodcock-Johnson 4th edition. And the next thing you know, I'm getting a call from somebody saying, do you want to go to Indonesia and help develop the test? And so I was sitting here, that's time I was going like this. You know, how did I get from Minnesota, that's in the middle of the United States, right below Canada. How did I get from there to here? It's like, it's a very unusual journey. And it's like, the fact that I'm here, I'm almost kind of almost, I don't know what it is. Excited, philosophical. It's just strange to be here, that you're here listening to me. So that's kind of a little personal story about what I wanted to be and now what I am. I'm going to be presenting, and we've made the decision that if you have questions as I go along, ask them. Please ask. And then, but at the end of this morning, we're going to have a session for open-ended questions for everybody. And if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, or if you want to write it down in your native language, I think you can write them down, and Abi is going to collect them. Then he'll come up here with me and translate, and I'll talk about the AJT test. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to be talking mostly about what's called CHC Theory. Excuse me, so the theory part is really going to be this afternoon, where we go through the theory. This morning is more kind of a historical update and a little bit of about the AJT. And just to give you a little more background from where I am and what I do, I'm currently the director of the Institute for Applied Psychometrics. That is my private company. It's a corporation. It's basically me and my computer. A lot of people see the word institute and they call me and say they want to come and visit my institute, which I think is a big building somewhere. And it's not just me and my computer. I used to have some staff, but I don't have staff anymore. It's just me. I'm a visiting professor at the University of Minnesota in educational psychology, where I work. I help out with dissertations, and I guest lecture, that kind of stuff. I work with a neurotechnology company called Interactive Metronome that's into brain fitness kind of stuff. That's not related to today. And of course, I'm here primarily because of the YDB Foundation, and that's what I'm going to be explaining. But I'm also doing some international work down in Brazil right now with the Ayrton Senna Institute. They're developing some group tests to measure things like critical thinking, complex problem solving, and they want to use the CHC model. So that's kind of what I'm doing now and what my affiliations are. Some people think this is me as a child, because I was a little strange as a child. But I did a lot of weird things. I used to spend a lot of time with numbers, and that was before there were calculators. So I was doing a lot of stuff with numbers, and people thought I was in my neighborhood thought I was a little odd. But that is not me, but some people think it is. Okay. If you want more information, I have a web page called the Mind Hub. And if you go to that web page, if you look, there's a section on research reports, books and articles. You can download all kinds of PDFs of articles of stuff I've written, book chapters, and a lot of PowerPoint slides. And if you go over here, I have a blog, but it doesn't allow me to do that. Okay. Oop. That's the problem with touch screens. I have a blog called IQ's Corner, where if you want to keep up with current stuff, I post stuff there almost every day or every other day. So there's a lot of free information about CHC theory and the Woodcock-Johnson. So if you really want to learn a lot more, there's a lot of information there. A lot of PowerPoints, a lot of articles, and it's all for free. You can just kind of go there and get it. So let me just kind of get started. How many are in psychology in terms of your training or background? Okay, so not a lot of you. Oh, okay, good. Well, all of them? Most of them, okay, most of them. Well, when you take your first class in psychology at a university as an undergraduate, you go through this, what's the definition of psychology? There's all kinds of definitions. And I just took this, it's not even a definition, but it's from the American Psychological Society. The psychology is the study of the mind and behavior. It's a very simple definition. We try to understand how people behave and why they behave and what they do and how we can predict things and such. And the whole goal is to understand behavior. That's what we're kind of all about. I'm not going to read the slides to you. You can read them. I'm just going to highlight the things. But one of the points I really want to make is that in psychology, the area of intelligence and intelligence testing has been probably the most studied area in all of psychology. It's probably been the most studied, and intelligence is the most understood construct or hypothetical construct we have in psychology. It's been the most studied. It's been one of the most controversial too, because intelligence tests have been used for good and they've been used for bad. So the word intelligence sometimes has a bad meaning to a lot of people, especially people who don't understand what's going on, but it's probably the most, I'm pretty sure, and this was an article by Linda Godfredson and Donald Sokolowski saying that it's the most studied area in psychology, and it is, so we know a lot. And what we really know is that the psychometric sophistication, the math behind developing tests, has become extremely sophisticated over 100 years. I know there's a couple of psychometricians in the audience here, and we started way back in the 1900s, and we developed these technologies to develop tests which are really at a very high level, and it's probably one of the most important things that has come out of psychology. One of the most. There's plenty of things. So I'm really excited about this topic. And I think, so this is like following the tradition of Dr. Santoso, and I think it's honoring his tradition, I don't know, I think it's very important. So, to understand individual differences, you have to ask the right question. And sometimes people ask the wrong question when we're talking about intelligence tests. This is not a good question, this one. How smart is my child? That's the wrong question. It might be useful information, how smart is my child, but the real important use of intelligence tests and understanding individual differences is a better question. How is my child smart? Because IQ is just not one thing right, up here. Intelligence is made up of a lot of different abilities. So you can see in your children, or comparing yourself with brothers or people you work with, some people are smarter different ways. So the important thing is that when we use intelligence tests is not to say, well, this person's the smartest and then this one's the next and put them in order. That's not a good use of intelligence tests. The good use of intelligence tests in theories is, how is somebody smart? Because we all have our own mountains and valleys, and intelligence testing has gotten into trouble when we look at this question. How smart is somebody, and rank them and then make decisions about them. That's sometimes that's useful, but the better thing is, how is somebody smart? And that's how intelligence tests should be used. Still talking about individual differences, all children do not learn the same way. And if you've ever been in a schoolroom, you can see it. Not everybody learns the same way. And I like to talk about mountains and valleys. That we have, and I'll be going through the theory of intelligence that says there's more than one ability. There's like 8 major ability areas and up to 16 in total. That we have our own mountains and valleys. Mountains are your strengths, valleys are maybe weaknesses, and everybody's got their own mountain range. Everybody has their own terrain or landscape. And we need to understand that, because the goal of the AJT and intelligence testing, I think it should be in the schools here in Indonesia, is to understand everybody's unique pattern and then to help them learn the best. So how do we do that? Well, we need to design education to take advantage of each child's unique strengths and weaknesses. And to do that, you need two things. You need a map. You need to know what are if you're going to the mountains to climb them, mountain range and stuff, you need to have a map to know where to go and know where to find things. So in intelligence, you need a map. What is the map of human intelligence? And that's where we've had different theories over the years. And what I'm going to talk about today is the CHC theory is the map. It's the best available map we have now to go in and discover and figure out where to go when we're trying to help people. Now, once we have a map, we need tools. We need tools to measure each person's map and where they are in that landscape. So we need a good theory or blueprint, framework. The way I think, if you ever build a house or build a building, you need a blueprint. The architect needs a blueprint, a plan. And that's what the map is. You need a good theory or model of intelligence to develop the right kind of tools. So I'm going to say a few things that might be a little controversial. I don't know. Indonesia currently does not have sufficient contemporary intellectual assessment tools. What I mean by contemporary is up-to-date, based on the most current theory. I know because of necessity, a lot of intelligence testing has been taking tests from the United States and bringing them over, like bringing the WISC over. And that's, the best maybe that's been available, and maybe now the WISC 3 is available here. But those tests were not developed here in Indonesia. They were developed in the United States to ask questions and do tasks that make sense in the United States. And I'm sure when you brought those tests over here, they didn't quite work right, and you had to fix some things, change some things. And the sample that those tests were normed on were United States kids, not Indonesian kids. So when I say Indonesia does not have a contemporary intellectual, enough of them right now, is because you don't have enough that have been developed in Indonesia and are standardized on your population and not a U.S. population or a different population. And education in Indonesia, I believe, can benefit from contemporary, comprehensive, and sound Indonesian-based intelligence testing tools. There's nothing wrong with taking like the WISC 3, WISC 4, and now there's a WISC 5, and bringing it over and adapting it. There are some issues about it. You can adapt it and make it work somewhat here, but it's still not the best solution. The best solution is to develop one here. And that would help better understand and work with children. So I'm basically saying the same thing over and over, that an Indonesian developed intelligence category based on the best known map of human intelligence is needed to help us educate Indonesian students with unique learning needs, because not everybody's the same. So I'm going to do a brief overview of the AJT here. Some of you are maybe, I think, actually gathered some of the data for the AJT, actually did some of the testing. It's a project that was sponsored by the YDB Foundation and is now also affiliated with the MCI company that Abi's work is in charge of. And the project started under the direction of George and Laurel Tahia, and with Abi being the kind of the manager or director of the program. It's been a 4-year, if you don't know the history, we've been doing this for 4 years now. I can't believe it's been 4 years. An effort between YDB staff, faculty at the University of Gajah Mada, and then other consultants like me and some others within the country of Indonesia have worked as a team for 4 years to develop this test. And this will be, there may be tests that have been brought over from other countries that have been adapted and normed here, or you gather data here in Indonesia. But the AJT will be the first that I know of, the first ever Indonesian-based, individually administered, that means not a group test, for school-age children. It'll be the first one ever developed in Indonesia. quality and technical standards. And what do I mean by that? There are the standards that are considered gold standards in test development, in psychometrics. They're called what is the exact name? The standards for educational and psychological tests. They've been around since 1966. They've been revised 5 times. The most recent standards came out in 2014, and the AJT was developed according to those standards. Because you can go out and just put together a test and go out and give it to people, but there are certain procedures you should follow according to what has been established as the right way to do it. And the AJT followed the gold standards. That's why it's a 4-year project. It takes a long time to do this. It's going to be, and I think your country should be extremely proud of this, it's going to be one of the most, if not the most comprehensive intelligence test in the world. I'm going to say that again. It is going to be one of the most, if not the most comprehensive intelligence test in the entire world. That's something I think your country can be extremely proud of. The only other test that gets close and is almost at the same level is one I'm a co-author on called the Woodcock-Johnson. But this will be more comprehensive than the Wechsler's in terms of how much it measures. This is a really big deal. Indonesia, psychologists, faculty, people who give the test, you have the chance here, and especially in this part of the world, to be the leaders of intelligence testing, especially in Asia around here. I've joked with Abhi sometimes that we should bring this over to the United States and translate it and compete with the United States tests because it's so comprehensive. I would get in trouble, but it is. I mean, this is important. This is one of the most comprehensive in the world, and I don't think the word's gotten out much about that yet. And the results are intended to help develop educational programs to help children in schools. And the only thing I'll say about that is in most educational systems, including in the United States and other places, when a teacher is teaching to a class, she usually teaches to the middle and uses one approach. And that works good for most students, but there are the students who are really gifted and the students who have learning problems that don't do well with that. And the idea here is that a test like the AJT will help when we find children who are not doing well to figure out why they don't do well with the instruction that the teacher is using and develop an alternative way for them to learn. And also, I think it would be very important, it will help parents better understand their children. Because sometimes kids get bad grades and they get tired of school and they say, I don't want to do it. You know, they get angry, they get bad attitude, they're not motivated. And sometimes it's not because the parents interpret that as they don't want to do it. And what really is going on is they can't do it. And so the test will help us help figure out which kids really are motivation problems and which ones are really learning problems.
They're all in the same class at school. Children learn in different ways, and this becomes more evident when they start formal schooling. What challenges do students face in class? Given the same assignment, we see here there are 7 ability domains that influence students' learning styles. When a student struggles with one of the domains, it makes learning harder. Let's take a look. Coco struggles with comprehension. After reading the instructions, she was still confused on what she was supposed to do.
I don't understand what I just read.
Louis struggles with fluid reasoning. He could not apply reasoning to unfamiliar problems.
I wonder what comes after this.
Worm struggles with short-term working memory and loses information quickly.
There are too many things to remember. I've already forgotten the first point.
Lori struggles with long-term memory retrieval. She has trouble recalling facts even though she had learned them before.
I don't remember learning this.
Visu struggles with visual spatial processing. It's hard to perceive shapes, forms, and images.
Oh no! These numbers look like they are swimming on the page and won't line up.
Audrey struggles with auditory processing. It's hard to process what her friends and teachers are saying, especially when there are distractions.
I don't understand what you're saying. There's too much noise.
Speed, a nickname he got because he's the fastest runner in class, struggles with processing speed. He always runs out of time doing assignments because it is hard to process even easy, basic tasks.
I hope I don't have to take notes. I write so slow. We'll never get this done.
Researchers have come to agree that people don't have just one single general ability, but many abilities that are organized in a hierarchy. Students would be able to learn more effectively if their teachers knew how to identify the root of students' learning difficulties. It's easy for some students to grasp an assignment right away, while others struggle and some who can't understand disengage. Educators and assessors need multiple data points in order to truly understand how each student learns. So what can we do about this? Professors Cattell, Horn, and Carroll referenced over a century of research on human intelligence and developed the CHC model. It is the best validated model of human cognitive abilities. The Dharma Brahmagna Foundation, or YDB for short, is using this CHC model to develop a new cognitive assessment known as the AJT CogTest. This AJT CogTest is one of the most comprehensive, individually administered measures of intelligence in the world. The AJT CogTest was developed specifically for students in Indonesia and identifies how students learn. So how do students benefit? It identifies students' strengths and weaknesses in 7 broad cognitive abilities. It helps teachers understand how each student in the class learns. The teacher also better understands how a student processes information, learns from experience, and adapts to the environment. The teacher uses the AJT CogTest results to develop individualized education programs, or IEPs. With their IEPs and well-trained teacher, the students can now achieve their learning goals.
It's designed to help identify kids with special needs and to measure their special needs. Now, it won't work well with people who've got really severe intellectual disabilities. I mean, but it should be able to be used with kids with special needs. Yes, that's it was designed that way. It's intended to be used for students in the normal range, from the up in the gifted, and those who are having problems. Yes.
Severe autistic student. Mm-hmm. So how severe it is to have this test?
Well, how severe? It all depends. They have to be able to follow directions, and they're simple directions. They have to be able to stay focused and concentrate on a task. It's one-on-one testing, so there's a person across the table. So and they have to be developmentally. The test norms go down to age 5, so we can measure kids who are 5 who are below that down to about a 4. So they have to be at least at a developmental level of about 4.5. If somebody's not, functioning below a 4.5-year-old level, I don't think the test can be used for them. But it's intended for people between 5 and 18. And if the child can understand verbal directions, if they can understand and take a whisk, they should be able to understand and take this, because it was one way of saying it. But there'll be some kids that won't be able to be tested if they can't sit still, can't attend, and don't understand the language. Yeah, IQ of 100. I mean, so it doesn't compare to other cultures or other. I'm even understanding the question.
No, I mean it's not the norm, but what I don't understand is that it's based on several abilities, cognitive abilities, right? Mm-hmm. And when it's mentioned as this is developed based on Indonesian children cognitive abilities, then I wonder what it would be, different from other children in the world. I mean, why does it have to be like it's based on Indonesian children?
Well, I don't know how, if you want to compare Indonesian children to other kids in other cultures to see, does intelligence differ in terms of strengths and weaknesses, that research needs to be done. We haven't done that research. And the reason it's developed on Indonesian children is because the fundamental rule or principle of intelligence testing is you compare a child's performance against other people that are similar to them in their country. That's just the way you're supposed to do it. Whether Indonesian children show a different pattern of strengths or higher in certain things than in other cultures, I don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. That have to be done. I'm sure I'm still not answering the question correctly. Okay,
so in what ways that you base your statement that this is based on Indonesian children?
Well, it's based on Indonesian children because the tests were developed, and then we went out and we sampled children from 5 to 18 in Indonesia, 4,800 of them. So the norms, instead of the Wechsler, which are the norms are based upon U.S. children, the norms here, what is typical, what is expected, is based upon what we found on 4,800 subjects from age 5 to 18. So it's based on actual children tested here in Indonesia, and the sample was meant to be representative of Indonesia. So that's what I mean. These are good questions, yes.
Only 7 been
in a video, yes.
Yes. So what is the
okay?
Another one.
I'll go through that this afternoon. But what happened is evil, and it was a kind of not a mistake. It's just we've learned that there are 2 different ones. GLR should be split into how good are you at learning something and getting it into memory, storing something. That's learning memory or learning efficiency, and it's just how good can you get stuff into your memory. And the other ability is retrieval. How do you get it out of your memory? For a while there, the theory had them together, that they were kind of the same thing. We've now realized that some people can get stuff stored, but they can't get it out. And the research has shown that those are distinct abilities, and I'll go through them. Yes. Okay.
And another more question. Just wonder. So what is the difference between this CHC and maybe multiple intelligence
of Gardner?
Proposed by
okay, Howard Gardner.
Yeah, Howard Gardner. Yes.
Okay, let me talk about that. Let me talk about that this afternoon. Okay. Okay. I actually have some slides. I'll have to find them. That helps. Yeah, they're different, but there's some things in common, but there's some differences, and I'll do that this afternoon. That's a very good question. These are good questions. The one question nobody has asked yet is what is AJT? And Abhi needs to answer that one. You stand up, because most people say, what's AJT?
Namanya Wechsler, Budoko Johnson, nama-nama orang kan. Jadi pada waktu kita mencoba memberikan nama, akhirnya tim sepakat memberikan namanya itu berdasarkan nama orang, dan A itu dari Adi, J itu Julia. Jadi Adi Julia Tahia itulah anak dari George Tahia dan Laurel Tahia. Jadi itu nama anak dari dua pasangan yang memberikan dana sehingga alat tes ini bisa kita buat dan kita persembahkan untuk Indonesia.
Okay, these are good questions. The idea of about this is we need to remember that intelligence test, no matter if it's the Wechsler or the AJT, is all about this part of the child. It's about the cognitive component, and the cognitive component, the intelligence. We can, with the best available intelligence tests in the world, in the United States, the Wechslers, the Woodcock-Johnson, the AJT, research says we can explain maybe 40 to 50% of school achievement with that. Now that's a lot in psychology. If you can explain 40 to 50% of anything, that's about the limit in psychology of explaining anything. The other things that we have to keep in mind is it doesn't get into social, emotional, or affective stuff, or what's called cognitive or motivation or growth mindsets or physical abilities. So it doesn't get into these other things which are also important for school learning. So the AJT and intelligence testing helps us understand this part, but to really understand a child, we need the other part. So I don't want you to come away from here thinking that an intelligence test and the AJT test will give you everything you need to know about a child. There's a lot more to children that are out here that are you have to measure with other kind of tests and methods. So that's just kind of a reminder. And that's been the primary focus of the AJT, is the cognitive area. So let's start moving more into, let's make sure, okay. What I've been saying so far is that intelligence is not a single ability, and children should not be labeled smart or not smart. We look at how smart they are. And I'm going to give a little explanation of how psychological testing works. It's kind of like Psychometrics 101, beginning class. Okay. When you say somebody is smart or somebody is bright, how do you make your judgment about that? You don't have to say it out loud unless somebody wants to. What's the basis for saying, "I'll be smart"? Can you look into his brain? You can't get into his brain and see what the smarts are. You do it based on what he does. You observe behavior. So that's how we evaluate whether somebody's smart and what their intelligence is based upon what they do, because we can't get into the brain unless we do brain scans and that kind of stuff. So I like to think about the thing about an iceberg, that the part underneath is what's inside the brain and such, and we can't get into that, but we can see the top of the iceberg. So psychological testing has been working for 100 years, since the early 1900s, to try to figure out what's going on underneath the iceberg or in the brain. And this is hidden. We can't see it. We can't measure it, except through very expensive brain scans. What we can see is what's observable. What's the observable part? And that's what testing is all about, is we take and we develop tests and tasks that allow us to see a person do something that we believe relates to their intelligence that's hidden. And so we develop tests like these, tasks like this. You've got this pattern, and you need to figure out which one goes in the box there, and you've got 4 to choose from. Or you've got tests like this that go blank 5, 9, 13. So we develop tests to have somebody perform in front of us in a standard test. And we've developed, it's been 100 years we've been working on these kind of tasks, so there's a lot of them available. And from that, we make judgments about intelligence. We measure it by looking at observable behavior. And the psychometric approach to intelligence is the most dominant approach in intelligence. It does not mean there are other approaches and theories of intelligence. There's Piaget's approach. That's a very respected and valid approach. There's information processing theory. There's Gardner's theory, which is a little bit different. And there are other theories and such and models that are just as important. I'm not trying to say they're not. But the one that has been the most researched and has developed the best measurement technology is the psychometric approach, which means doing this, developing tasks and tests, and then analyzing those tasks to figure out what are the major abilities. I'm going to skip this one for now. I might come back to this. So it's a little, you've got it on there. It's a very interesting figure, and if we have time, I'll come back to it, but it might get us off task for a moment. Okay? So tests are, so we've got inside a person's brain, what we consider the major abilities. Each of those clouds is a major ability domain. And what psychologists do is we say, we want to measure this ability here. It's called fluid reasoning, novel problem solving. So we developed tests to try and measure that ability, and we developed different kinds. And then once we develop those tests, we go out and we gather norms, and we get these normal curves that tell us where is a person on that ability. So this is all what test development is all about. We have a theory about what the abilities are, and we're using the CHC theory. We develop tests so a person can show you what they can do in these abilities, and then we end up getting scores. And that's kind of the psychometric approach to test development. So, if we're trying to develop tools, like I said before, we need a map. And this is the little history lesson I'm going to give you. Intelligence scholars have been trying since the 1900s. I'm not sure if the idea of a Rosetta Stone is in your culture, to find the Holy Grail, the key to what are the nature of human intelligence. We've been studying it for 100 years. And why is this important? Because all sciences have what are called taxonomies and classification systems. And you need a classification system to advance research, conceptualizing language, data analysis, and communication. So all sciences have a standard, what's called nomenclature, a standard system for explaining things. And the best way to talk about this is, have you all seen this one? This is the periodic table of elements in chemistry. Most of you should have seen this somewhere in school, in high school or something. You know, this is the, and I think it's been modified since then. This is the known elements in chemistry that people have identified. Took decades to find it. This is a taxonomy. This is a model of what we know, and this is what we've been looking for in psychology, in intelligence, for 100 years. What is the table? What is it? What's the map? And as I say, there's been over 100 years of research, and you can't see this. But if I go like this, see, starting in 1904, research started, and there's this timeline that was presented at a conference in 2004, and as you can see, it identifies all the major things that have happened, and who did them, and how we ended up. Now we're at 2017. So what I'm going to do for you is give you a shortcut from where we started and where we are. It's summarizing 100 years of research on intelligence. And what we have found is that we originally thought there was a single ability called G. It means general intelligence, which is, so you give somebody a bunch of tests, and the reason people do good on them is they have a single ability in their brain. Well, we now know that's not true, that there are multiple different abilities. So the thing we've learned in 100 years is that intelligence is not a single ability, it's many abilities. It's like this. There's just not one element, there's multiple elements. And I'm just going to go through for just historical, for those who want to understand this from a historical perspective. If you've had a psychology course in intelligence, you'll hear the name Spearman, and he basically gave a lot of different tests to people. You know, these are tests, test 1, test 2, test 3. They all measure different things, but then they developed a procedure called factor analysis, and it said there's one ability. That was back in the 1900s. The periodic table, they both came at it from different ways and said this is what intelligence is, and that's why we have now what's called the Cattell-Horn-Carroll model. These models have been put together, and so it's a single model now considered, and it's considered the consensus model that there are primary mental abilities, general broad abilities, and maybe G at the top. Some people believe in G, some don't. So, in terms of 100 years of history, we started with there's only one ability, and we said no, there's no one ability, there's some primary, and there's actually 7 of them. And then Cattell and Horn came along and took this theory and made it that yes, there are these, but there are these broad abilities. Carroll came along and said, yeah, I agree with you, but there's also, I think, G at the top. So Carroll's model includes this one and this one. And that's how we ended up with CHC. So basically, what we're going to do the rest of the day is we're going to talk about this, and you can skip the 100 years of research. Okay, to make the point, we're about 15 minutes from a break here. And this is really important. You have to believe, if you don't believe me, I wrote this article in 2009 in the Journal of Intelligence that basically said the Cattell-Horn-Carroll model is the best taxonomy or model of human intelligence. Others have said the same thing. Here's in the Handbook of Educational Psychology, some very important people named Ackerman and Lohman. The Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory is the best validated model. I'm just trying to give you evidence that it's just not me saying this. So the CHC model is analogous to the periodic table of elements in chemistry. Think about it that way. That we now, after 100 years, we kind of know what the major elements are, what the major abilities are, and sub-abilities. We're not done. This chart is not done. We're finding more abilities all the time. But think about that we now have the map. And so I'm just saying the same thing over and over, that the CHC map is what we're using to understand human intelligence, and what you should when you use intelligence tests, and is what the AJT is based on. But down here at the bottom, you see the WISC-4, WISC-5, and WAIS-4 are now basically CHC-based instruments also. So if you're using the Wechslers and you think the Wechsler is the gold standard, the newest Wechslers are basically CHC also. So all the major intelligence tests in the world are moving to the CHC model because it's the right model. And you don't have this slide, but if you want to know, I put this one in after talking with Abhi and some of the staff yesterday. The WISC is now in the 5th edition. It came out in, I think, 2015. And it's different than the WISC-4. It's a lot different than the WISC-3, and it's a lot different than the WISC. And it's got a lot of different scores you can get from it. But there are these ones called the primary index scales right here. And if you read the manuals and look at the stuff, it gives you a verbal comprehension score, which is GC. It gives you a visual spatial score now, which is GV. It gives you a fluid reasoning score. That's wrong. That should be GF right there. Okay, I did this over breakfast this morning, GF. This should be working memory, GWM. These slides together, and this is processing speed. So the new WISC-5 has got scores on it, they call this, which match up exactly with the CHC model. And then they got some other supplemental scores, and they got some down here called complementary indexes. They measure GR, GL, and GLR and GL together. So in conclusion, CHC is the most comprehensive, empirically grounded working taxonomy. It's changing. We're finding some new stuff about it all the time. It's serving as the design and interpretation blueprint or template for almost all intelligence tests nowadays. Not all of them. There's some that are based on neuropsychological models, which are different, and that's okay. It's an evolving model. It doesn't stay static. We're finding there were some errors in the model, like GLR. Should have been GL and GR. It serves as a map. It's like your map for understanding cognitive abilities. And the most important thing is providing us a taxonomy so we can talk to each other about human abilities using the same language, just like the test of. So if you're a Wechsler person and you still want to stay with the Wechsler, you should at least talk about the Wechsler scores and subtests in the language of CHC. And there are all kinds of books about how to do that. I would suggest when the AJT comes out, you go to the AJT. And just to make sure you, the first part of this morning is to stress how important the CHC thing is. It's now going global. It's in Indonesia now. Australia, there is Woodcock Johnson's in Australia. People in Turkey are developing tests around the CHC model. Belgium and the Netherlands, they're doing it. Even Iran, there's some people contacting me from Iran about wanting to develop tests. There is Arabic version of the Woodcock-Johnson in Jordan now that was just there. And there's people in Brazil doing a lot of work on CHC theory and measurement. And it's not just there. Oh, don't you do that. Okay, I'll do this. It won't take long. It's the beauty of Windows now. Windows now allows you to get back. In the old days, you'd get what's called the blue screen of death. Oops. And then we're going to be get a kind of a break point here. Just a second. Yeah. There are also CAC test developments going on in Europe. In Romania, Slovakia, Latvia, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary. So it's basically, once in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the CHC, the Horn-Cattell model came together with the Jakarta model. The word got out, and most people developing intelligence tests now are using the CHC model to help develop their tests. So, I almost maybe need to let me just explain this thing here before as I close for our break. Maybe I won't. No, I'm gonna come back to that later because we are at the break point. So the summary of what I've done this morning, and then after we're done with this, I'm gonna start going into the CHC theory. We'll start it this morning, and then we'll finish it this afternoon. Okay. So the important thing to take away from this morning is that contemporary psychometric research has now converged on the CHC model as being the consensus working taxonomy of human intelligence. It is the foundation of most contemporary intelligence tests. And for those of you who are at universities, I think you should be teaching it in your university classes about human intelligence. And the important thing for understanding the AJT was developed from the perspective of the CHC model, and almost all intelligence tests are doing it now. So the AJT is going to be state of the art in terms of the theory, and it's normed here, it's developed by Indonesians, the items are made for Indonesian children, and it's going to be based on the best taxonomy and theory we know of human intelligence. And I think YDB, MCI, and those who developed it should be extremely proud, and I think your country is now going to have an extremely important set of tools to help understand children, and also to allow Indonesia, if you want to do it, become leaders in intelligence testing and intelligence theory. I'm serious, and this, especially in this part of the world, because not too much CHC is going on in this part of the world right now. That is kind of where I wanted to end before our break, to not convince you or persuade you, just to tell you what I think is the truth. And it's just not me, it's everybody in psychometric theories of intelligence test development. Say, if you want to understand human intelligence, we've been trying to do it for 100 years. We've had 100 years of research, and we've ended up with CHC as the best framework that you should use to develop tests and interpret tests. And that's kind of it. So we'll take a few questions before our break. Yes?
Has.
Okay. What was the first question again?
The contemporary. Why?
Contemporary? I mean, it's the most
consensus
current.
Yeah.
It's the most current. It's what, if you ask people in the United States, what's the current accepted model of intelligence? It's the current one. Contemporary in our country means what is the most up to date.
Okay.
What do we know now? So that's what contemporary means. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know that word doesn't translate well. What's the current? So if you've got a bunch of psychologists who study intelligence together, and you ask them what's the current best understanding of human intelligence from a psychometric perspective, they would say CHC. Most of them would say CHC. The second question is the model and test. Okay, that's a very good point. How am I going to explain? I know I got slides on it. The model is kind of like, well, GC. The test is how you measure those things, how you operationalize them. So the AJT we develop tests to try measure GF. Somebody else could take tests and develop tests that measure GF also. Though the tests are standardized tasks we give to people to allow them to, so we can, break time, so we can see and make judgments about their intelligence in GF or GC. The model is a theory. The test is the tools to measure the theory. Okay.
Yes, I got that one. But what I mean is, why you differentiate between these terms, two terms? Because you also mentioned that Wechsler test, the updated 5. If I'm not mistaken, you say the Wechsler WIS is the 5th now. Is also using CHC model, right? Then appear here is about CHC test as well. So I wonder what's the difference later on with the Wechsler test, which is the updated one.
What's the difference of the Wechsler test?
Wechsler.
Yeah.
With CHC tests.
Oh, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this right, but they have CHC test. Let's take GC, verbal. They've got vocabulary test, they've got an information test, and a similarities test. Okay, so that's how they measure GC. AJT measures it through a test called vocabulary and language development. So they're basically very similar tests. They're just their tests and our tests, but they both measure GC. The Wechslers has got fluid reasoning. What?
Digit span. Digit span.
Digit span is under GWM. So there's digit span, okay, which is working memory. The more recent Wechslers have got a test called letter number sequencing. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
It may not be on the WISC. I can't remember if it came in the WISC 3 or the WISC 4 or WISC 5. There's a test called letter number sequencing, which is a working memory test. That's under GWM. AJT has got a test called complex working memory, and it's got digispan forwards and digispan backwards. So we're basically doing some of the same type of tests, but they're all GWM tests. So if you give an AJT to somebody and a Wechsler, you should compare digispan and letter number sequencing to the AJT test of complex working memory and what we call repeating letters. They're measuring the same broad ability with tests that are slightly different, but there are some similarities. But the AJT also measures, you can measure working memory, you can measure fluid reasoning many different ways, and different test publishers choose to do it different ways. So a lot of our tests are somewhat similar to some of the Wechslers, but some of them are a lot different too. And they don't measure some things like auditory processing or auditory ability. So it's, I'm not sure, they are moving to CHC, but they measure it slightly differently than we do, but we're still measuring kind of the same ability constructs, the model part. I'm not sure if that makes sense. And the reason for mentioning the WISC 5 is I'm not here to sell the WISC 5. I'm basically trying to give the point that if you think the Wechslers are the gold standard, they're now following CHC. CHC is the important thing is the model, the theory. CHC is it. Everybody's developing tests to do that. And you've got one here in this country now that is based on that model from the start, and it was developed here and nationally normed here, which I think is the big thing to use. You should be interpreting your test from that model. And I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to show you sample tests of these abilities, not from the AJT, because I can't display them right now, but some tests from our test. Should we take a break? 15 minutes? These are good questions, so 15 minutes. And then we'll go for 45 minutes, right?
What difference with spiral board model and Thurston model or Vernon model that the same with cattle model, like PEF? general ability and specific ability, board ability and test specific abilities. What different with CHC model? Sorry.
From which ones? From Vernon, or you said Thurston?
Cyril Bert Thurston, Louis Leon Thurston.
Thurston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Philip Ewart Vernon.
Who?
Vernon.
Vernon.
Now it's spelled, yeah.
Vernon. Oh. Okay.
And what different with Howard Gardner? Howard Gardner has multiple intelligence.
Okay.
Too.
Yeah, I didn't explain. I only showed a few of these. Fluid intelligence. He said, well, there's inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, and and maybe quantitative reasoning. Those are three primary mental abilities. But he didn't say that they all three are underneath fluid intelligence. He did not have that. Vernon's model is very similar to this one. Vernon had general intelligence at the top, and then he broke it down into sub areas. So Vernon fits in here also. The Vernon model is kind of similar to this one. So Vernon's model, Thurston's model, which were all in the 50s and the 1960s and such, basically all got subsumed into these two. They built and then ended up down here. So Vernon's model is in here. It's just that Vernon's model was incomplete. Vernon's model had primary mental abilities. Then he had these broad things called verbal educational factors and practical intelligence or mechanical abilities. So they're very similar. They're in there. I just didn't cover them. Other questions before the break? And if I didn't answer, just come up to me and we can talk.
So how about Cyril Bert? I don't know how to spell CYRILBURT. Cyril Bert.
Cyril Bert?
Yeah.
I am not that familiar with his model anymore. I can't remember what the model really is. I know he got in trouble because some of his research was faked. He got in a lot of trouble after he died. There was a scandal about his research. But I can't remember what his model is. So I have to. I don't know. I don't remember Cyril Bert's model. I can look it up here during the break, maybe.
Okay.
It's a good question, though. I should know that. So let's take a 15-minute break. Maybe exceptional bodily kinesthetic and intelligence. They may have exceptional bodily kinesthetic talent. I think what he's talking about is more the term I use, talent versus intelligence. And to understand it, you have to look at it, the real big picture. I had that slide up there that had cognitive, affective, and physical that circled the whole child. Well, you can. This is the work I'm doing down in Brazil. We were talking about this. You can talk about the physical domain of a person. And there are different physical abilities, psychomotor abilities, sensory perceptual abilities underneath it. You can talk about the cognitive domain, which talks about cognitive processes and knowledge. These are CHC abilities, okay? You can talk about what's called cognitive abilities, which it's ways of thinking, habits of mind. It has to do with motivation and these are old terms, volitional controls, self-regulation, getting into executive functions. How do you monitor and do a task once you decide to do it? Emotional self-regulation and cognitive self-regulation. And then there's affective, which has to do with temperament and traits and moods, basically social emotional. Okay? So when you talk about an entire person, you need to talk about all these things. And this is what Gardner's doing. He's talking about all of these together. His intelligences are different combinations of these things. When I'm talking CHC intelligence, I'm talking just this. And he's talking this. So the example I was talking to during the break here, if you've got, we went to, what was the name of that ballet again? We went on to, what was it called? Ramayana? Yeah, we went to the ballet outside of Jakarta. And these dancers were just probably had extremely high bodily kinesthetic intelligence, right? So they probably got extra strong abilities in the physical domain. I don't consider that this. So Gardner's bringing this in, but he's also talking about some of this too. If you look at a ballet dancer, they must have certain cognitive abilities that make them really good. Just think, the director of the ballet says, what I want you to do is this step, and then twirl this way, then do this and this. What cognitive ability that probably require? Probably visual spatial. They have to visualize their body. They have to see their body and their mind moving. So that's using a cognitive process. Okay, if the director says, do this, to this, to this, to this, to this, this, then this, that requires a lot of working memory. They could follow directions. And so that's just two examples. So when Gardner's talking about bodily kinesthetic, I think he's talking about this, probably plus some cognitive abilities. And he's probably also talking about over here. If you're a dancer, you have to use your body to express emotions. So you probably have to have good, well, I never did finish my thing. Strong abilities here, and certain kind of emotional characteristics that you can get in touch with your emotions, and you understand emotions, and you know how to express them. So when Gardner talks bodily kinesthetic intelligence, he's taking things here, here, and here, and here, and saying that. So he's going across. I call that talent. He calls it intelligence. I call this intelligence. So that's where I think what Gardner's doing. So if Gardner, let's use another example. He talks about logical mathematical intelligence. Okay, a psychometrician like me should be very high in logical mathematical intelligence. I like to do with numbers, I like logic, I like theory and stuff. So my physical abilities probably don't enter much into that, but there are certain cognitive abilities that make me a good psychometrician. High fluid reasoning, I can do deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, quantitative reasoning. I can think about and solve problems. I probably have high quantitative knowledge. I probably have good visual spatial abilities, because people who do well in mathematics and the sciences are good at visualization. So I'm probably good there. My feelings, my social emotional, most of the time I'm an introvert. I mean, I can come out here and talk and be crazy and be extrovert, but most of the time I spend a lot of time thinking by myself. I'm not a very outgoing person. So my emotional characteristics might be one of introspection, looking at myself, thinking about myself. Not myself, not being, but just staying more and being more with my own thoughts. That's what makes me a logical mathematical wizard. So I think Gardner his theory is, it's a theory of personal competence or traits, and he's going across all domains. So I think his model makes some sense. I really do. But if you ask me as a psychometrician and an intelligence theory, I say, no, he's not talking about intelligence. That's this. So part of it's semantics. It's a language terminology thing. He's looking at all of a person. When we talk, or I talk intelligence, I'm talking this. So I think the models are very compatible. They work together, just that he's looking at the broader picture of a person. So when he talks about somebody's got high social emotional intelligence, they're probably really high over here, with very strong traits here. There might be some cognitive abilities that might help you be socially emotional intelligence. Maybe if you have good GC, good verbal skills and language skills, allows you to communicate well with other people. So he's adding. This is called when you focus on a domain and go down this way. This is a vertical model of studying behavior. This is a horizontal model. For anybody who's a statistician, this is a factor analysis model. This is a multiple regression model. Basically, he's looking at the whole person and saying these things make a person high in this kind of, I wish he would say talent or personal competence and non-intelligence. So that's how I think they work together. And that's why I think there's so much confusion, because he uses the word intelligence in a very broad sense, and most of us who really study it just limit it to that. Does that make sense? Well, I'm glad I could help. What have I got? We got 40 minutes, right? Okay, we're doing really good on time. I want to go back to, I'm going to go right into this. We're going to get started on this part, which I was going to wait for this afternoon, but I might come back to a couple slides I skipped. We'll just maybe do one area, maybe two, because how long is this afternoon? 2 hours? 2 hours, okay. Okay, I'm glad I could help you with Gardner. Don't ask me about Robert Sternberg. Is his theory over here, Sternberg's theory? I don't understand it. It's just, I am not intelligent enough to understand Robert Sternberg's theory. It's what we call construct dense. It just is, I don't know. Anyway, so now, so I've given you the overview about intelligence has come a long way from 1900 when we first started talking about it. And there were a lot of theorists along the way. We were talking during the break here about Vernon's model, about Bert's model. I didn't include them, but they were intermediate models on the way, and they you can see them in the CHC model if you maybe I'll put some slides together for that for some time in the future. I want to now go into CHC. What is it? So you can get, this is like the beginning of what is CHC theory. What are the broad domains, and what abilities are underneath them. And this is kind of the big message I've been trying to give to you today is, and I think you have this slide, it's more filled in, but we've had progress in here are theories of intelligence. We started with general ability, and then for a while we were into, there are two types of abilities, fluid and crystallized, or verbal and nonverbal, the original Wechsler. Then we got into the primary mental abilities, and just ignore this code here, which was Thurston and people like Bert and such. Then we got into multiple cognitive abilities, Cattell, Horn, and Carroll model. It came about in the early 1990s. And now we are over here, I call it Carroll, Horn, Cattell version 2.2. It's the current or contemporary approach. So theories have evolved. Down here are the tests that have been developed over time. There was the Stanford-Binet. The Stanford-Binet gives you a single IQ score. The old Stanford-Binet gave you a single IQ score. So it was consistent with Spearman's model. It was a G model. Then along came the various Wechslers. The first ones here, the WISCs, the WACE, the WACE-R, were verbal, nonverbal. Basically organized that way. So it was two ways of looking at intelligence. Then came the third version, WIPC3, WIS3, WACE3, that started to be more multiple intelligences, giving you like 3 index scores or 4 index scores. And now we got the WIPC4 and the WISC5, which are now into the area of CHC. They're not all the way up here yet because they don't measure some of the CHC abilities, but at least in the 4th and 5th edition. And the Stanford-Binet evolved from measuring G to measuring 4 abilities to now being a CHC measure. The Woodcock-Johnson was where Dr. Woodcock started. He started right about here, and his tests are all way over here. And there's a reason, because during the Woodcock-Johnson revision, the first one, the R, and the 3, we had 2 major consultants on the project. John Horn and Jack Carroll, the 2 C's of CHC. No, it's the C and the H of CHC. We actually had Raymond Cattell around, but he was too old to really help. So it's not an accident that the Woodcock-Johnson tests in the United States are considered the leading instruments on CHC, because we had the two leading theorists advising us. I understand that you have a test here called the CFIT in Indonesia. I don't know what the dates are, and it gives you a single IQ score, or does it give you multiple IQ scores? Single. So although I have talked to some psychologists, I talked to Dr. Perono at Bandung, and we've looked at the test items. It's measuring more than just one ability. But it only gives you one IQ score, so it's kind of stuck over here. And the Ravens gives you one IQ score, so it's stuck over here. So, I mean, this is where I've been told the current practice in terms of testing in Indonesia is around in here. There's an adaptation of the Wechsler 3, and some people are using the old Binet and the Ravens. But you want to be over here. You want to move your practice over here. So I call this a theory research assessment gap and I'm hoping this workshop will result in some of you saying, yes, we are here, we've got to get to here as fast as we can. Either by adopting the AJT, or if you're using the Wechslers, realize that part of it is not measuring some CHC abilities, and you maybe should borrow from the AJT, those tests that measure the things that you're not measuring in the Wechsler. But anyway, there's like a gap. And the gap is being filled in 2018 by the AJT. I sound like a salesman, don't I? I'm not a salesman. I'm just a consultant on this project. I have been paid to work on the project for 4 years, but I don't get any money from the sales of this. So, I mean, once I leave, that's it. So I'm not here. I believe in this. I hope you can tell from my excitement that I believe in science. I believe in the CHC model, and I'm trying to help. That's why I agreed to get involved with this project, was to try to save Indonesia all these many years in between that we did it in the United States and a lot in England and some other countries. Save you some time. Go to the head of the line. Get over here. So, I've already explained that the taxonomy or model has got general intelligence at the top, if you believe in that. These broad areas and narrow. So what I want to do is go through each one now. And I think we'll do one, maybe two before lunch. I don't know. And I'm going to give you the definition. And I think you've got the handouts. But your handouts don't include some slides I'm showing because they're actual test items. And ethically, I cannot print out test items that are on tests because it's a violation of professional codes and ethics. You shouldn't do that. Because once people get to know them out in the real world, then the tests are no longer valid. So let's start with GC, because it's the one most people understand the most. Comprehension knowledge. Sometimes it's called, I feel like I'm ignoring you people over here. I don't want to touch my computer. So I'll just go back and forth for a while. It's comprehension knowledge, or crystal, in a lot of psychology books, it's called crystallized intelligence. Okay. So I am not going to sit and read slides to you. You've got these printed out, right? Okay, I'll just do the red part. It's a person's, oh, thank you. Do you ever, I feel like I should dance and sing. I don't know if you know what that's about. A person's breadth and depth of acquired knowledge of the language, information, and concepts of a culture, right? Or the use of that language. So it's verbal information. What is a person's understanding of the common vocabulary and knowledge that most people in a culture should tend to have? This was very hard for, I think, for this test project, because your country is so diverse with so many islands and some people out in different places that may have not been exposed to things. I mean, I think this, so the decision was that that we were going to measure what is the predominant knowledge that most people in the major areas of the country know. And we can't test people who are out in some, I don't know what would be a good example of a remote island somewhere. these tests may not work for them, but it's what is the common knowledge that people should know in terms of vocabulary and language. And so that's the broad ability. Underneath are the narrow abilities. These are the more narrow parts that are all under GC. And one of them is called language development. Ooh, shouldn't do that. Which is understanding words in context. So it's taking words and language and understanding them in sentences. Can you understand and comprehend stuff that you hear when somebody speaks to you? Lexical knowledge is knowledge of definitions in words. Do you know what words mean? Do you know if you look at a picture of, can a person tell you what the word in your language is for that? Vocabulary is another term for it. The Wechslers measure that with a vocabulary. Well, AJT's got a vocabulary where you ask words, and then they're scored 0, 1, and 2. General information. What do you generally know about stuff that's important in your culture? What's the general knowledge that most people should possess? So as you can see, these are 3 narrow abilities under GC, but there are more. This is like the periodic table of elements. Under GC, there's a whole bunch of squares. Another important one is listening ability. You're doing it right now. Can you understand what I'm saying? Well, part of the problem, if you say, no, I can't, because I'm using English and you may not be able to process my English as well. It's the ability to listen to somebody talk, like in a lecture, in a class, or a teacher's telling a story, and can you comprehend and understand the basics of the story? It's your listening ability. And there are some other abilities that I have here, and you'll notice that this one's in bold, and these are in bold. These are the major GC abilities. These are minor ones that we don't really, they exist, but nobody really measures them because they're not that useful, so I'm not going to talk about them. So under GC is a broad thing, and that's why it looks like it's like this. It's broad, but it's got these narrow abilities underneath it. So GC is just not one ability, it's a number of abilities. And it can be language development. What's another word for near? Close. That's a synonym, right? Tell me another word for big. Okay. Let's go. Tell me another word for beautiful. Pretty? Okay. Tell me another word for look. Okay. See, so these are just sample items. They will start very easy, but like, tell me another word for, I don't know, very simple stuff. And then they go up to really, really hard ones for 18-year-olds and stuff. So that's one type of way of getting at measuring lexical knowledge, which was right there, which is one of these. So the idea is you pick a narrow ability and you start developing tests, and there are different ways to do it. Here's the other way we do it is, tell me the opposite of boy. Tell me the opposite of brother. Tell me the opposite of narrow. Okay, see? To be able to do that, you have to know the meaning of words. That's one way to measure vocabulary. Okay, that's one way. Here's another way. You show pictures. We have a test called picture vocabulary. Point to the horse.
Thank you. Yes, sir. As I assume that the test will be in Indonesian, I wonder if it's based on Indonesian formal language?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. The thing is, to the extent of my knowledge, the informal and formal language of Indonesian, it's very much different. And how do you address this issue in this test?
You want? I haven't had. Yeah, we were doing it with. You have a formal national language, right?
Yeah, but the Indonesian language that people use in daily lives, it's very much different from the formal Indonesian.
Okay.
And there has been research on that the difference between formal and informal Indonesian. And I wonder how...
Bobby has to, I haven't been involved in that part of the decision making.
Proses, memang kita temui sebenarnya banyak anak-anak yang tidak menguasai formal language. Jadi contohnya pada waktu di daerah Jawa, kita mengalami bahwa anak-anak itu nggak ngerti. Akhirnya setelah kita diskusikan dengan tim ahli dari UGM dan juga konsultasi dengan beberapa ahli dari luar, akhirnya diputuskan bahwa dalam pengadministrasiannya itu administrator akan membantu untuk menggunakan local language supaya anak-anak itu bisa mengerti. Ya, jadi ini memang sesuatu yang jadi agak sedikit non standar, tetapi menurut peneliti hal itu diperbolehkan. Jadi akhirnya seperti contohnya untuk begitu kita ambil data untuk di daerah Jawa Barat, banyak yang menggunakan bahasa Sunda untuk anak-anak yang mungkin kalau dia misalnya kasih benda, dia jawab dalam bahasa ibunya, itu kita benarkan, kita kasih skor.
Grammatical sensitivity, I think it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I understand if it's just vocabulary, you can answer in your own language, but if it's grammatical sensitivity, it's a different.
Kita nggak lihat grammatical, kita punyanya vocab ya kan di tes kita. Ada memang di dalam broad ability itu kita masukkan narrow yang banyak, tapi tidak semua kita tes. Jadi untuk setiap broad kita ada 2 atau sampai 3. Jadi nggak harus secara teori, ketika teori mengatakan satu broad ability ada 5 atau 6, kita buat tesnya untuk ke 6-6-nya. Kita cukup ambil 2 atau 3. Ya. Jadi khusus karena di Indonesia kita lihat grammatical ada problemnya, makanya kita nggak gunakan bagian itu. Kita hanya gunakan yang vocabnya saja. Ya.
I need a rest.
Yeah.
No, I don't. That felt good. I'm not sure what you just said, but I just know it was a big. This was an area that was really hard, GC, because of what you're talking about, and because we don't have to deal with it much in the United States. We have regional differences in the United States about some language things. People down south they talk a little bit different, and they talk slower, and they use some funny words, and we got some of that. But you guys have got like formal language, and then these informal. We don't have to worry about it in test development in the United States, and I know how did they address it? Tell me how we did it. Okay, good. I was hoping that's what you said, because that's what we do. We have, in the United States, we have a growing Hispanic population. Huge. The biggest part of our country that's growing are people who are Spanish-speaking people. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we allow students, if we ask them a vocabulary answer, and they can't answer it in English, but they can give it the right answer in Spanish, we give them credit. Because it's really important is do they know it. So that's good. I didn't know that was. I was hoping you were to say that, so I didn't get you in trouble. Other questions on this one, or GC, or just in general, because we could do one more before break, I think. Or we could just do questions. Should we do one more? Psychology course, I've been talking about the 8 abilities. There are 2 abilities that are basically considered the king and queen of the CHC court. I think that's kind of cute how I said that. That they are the abilities that are the most important for intellectual functioning. And when you do statistical analysis, they correlate the highest with the IQ score. Or if you're a factor analysis person, they load highest on the G factor. It's GC and GF, and especially this one, GF. And this is what the Ravens measures. The Ravens progressive color matrices or the standard progressive matrices. I know some of you use those tests. A lot of people will say if they only have a research study and they can only measure one thing to get an idea of the subject's intelligence, they usually give a measure of GF. This is kind of like the highest. This is the king, or maybe it's the queen. Sometimes the queen has more power. In my house, the queen has more power. And This is the definition I have. There's all kinds of definitions. The use of deliberate or controlled mental operations. You have to use effort. It's not something you can just do quickly like bang. To solve on-the-spot novel problems that you can't do automatically. So if a child or you are faced with a new, unique problem, a new situation, and you have to sit back and go, how am I going to solve this? And you've never solved these kind of problems before, or very rarely, and there's no quick automatic response about, oh, just do this, do this, do this. It's reasoning, what some people think is, somebody think is thinking, and it's solving unfamiliar problems. And the two major parts of it are deductive and inductive reasoning. And I'm going to show you examples so you know what that is. So it's really about learning concepts, solving problems, being a detective, solving a crime. I got this fact here, I got this fact, I got this evidence, I got this. What does it all mean? And GF, there are basically only 3 known abilities right now. There have been some others that have been mentioned, and they haven't achieved status yet in CHC. One of them is called Piagetian reasoning. There seems to be a Piagetian reasoning factor, but there aren't very good tests of Piagetian reasoning. Okay, doesn't mean that Piaget is wrong. Just the tests have been hard to develop. The 3 major parts of fluid reasoning are induction. Induction is being able to look at a problem and figure out the rule or rules that govern the problem, but you don't know what they are. And I'll show you some examples so this will make sense. You don't know ahead of time that there's some underlying rule or principle or concept to solve the problem, and you have to figure it out and then apply it. General sequential reasoning, which is actually, it should be called deductive, but this is the term that's kind of come down through psychometric history. It's when you know the rule, can you solve a problem? You don't have to discover it. And quantitative reasoning is kind of a mixture of these two, but it's a specialized ability to reason inductively or deductively with quantitative mathematical type problems. It's distinct from the other ones. And there are some more recent research that have been coming out in the last 10 years to say this might be one of the most significant indicators of high level of general intelligence, because it requires induction, deduction, but with mathematical symbols, basically. So let's go. Let's see how much time I have. Okay, I'm going to skip this part. You've got some on your slides. That's I'm giving it to you. Some sample behaviors that you might see in a classroom for somebody who's got problems with fluid thinking, or I'll mention a couple. Determining the main idea of a story, doing math word problems, just reading comprehension. They can't comprehend what's going on when they read. So these are just some samples. So let's show you how you might measure this. This is a test from the Woodcock-Johnson. There's a similar one on the AJT, but it's not designed the same. It's different items. And that the subject would see a problem like this. This would be a very easy one. And you've given them instructions. You got 1, 2, blank 4. So what's the answer? Okay. Let's go to this one. Blank 5, 9, 13. Why? Because it's going up 4 each time, right? Okay. Let's challenge you a little more. What's the answer to that one? I don't know. Why? I don't know. Why? Okay. These are very simple ones, actually. The ones that get up for the older children, I can't even solve them. I mean, we have test items for kids up to 18 years of age who are extreme, and the tests have to measure extremely bright kids who can do quantitative reasoning, and they sometimes are the rules to find are really complex. is, maybe multiplication is going on and division and, that kind of stuff. But you have to figure out the rule, right? That's induction. Then you have to apply it, and it's with mathematical symbols. So that's what makes it quantitative reasoning. Number series tests, quantitative reasoning tests are some of the historically oldest tests in intelligence testing and some of the best tests that have been around to measure fluid reasoning. Some intelligence tests include these. The new Stanford-Binet includes some stuff like this. We do, Woodcock-Johnson, the AJT does. I don't think the Wexlers do it. They do it a different way. But it's just to give you a little background. About 2 years ago, I consulted on a project in our country that was part of the other intelligence. It's called a key, and you explain it to the person. You go, a yellow with a black is the same as a black. So this is kind of like an equal sign, but they don't have to know equal, they just have no arrow. A yellow with a blue is the same as a blue. A blue with a black is the same as a yellow. So you teach them that. Then you flip the page, and the key is there, so they don't have to use memory. And then you get, first you've done some training first to get them to this, and you give them this and you say, what color goes in the blank box? Blue. And why is it blue? Because they have to go yellow, blue equals blue. So the rules are there. Don't have to discover the rules, you just have to apply it. Easy one. Okay. Now there's a key. And now the problems start to get, after you do a lot of easy ones, you get stuff like this. What color goes in the box? You're too quick. Okay, is it red? Huh. And why is it red? Okay, I have to figure this out. So you got them. You don't have a red and black up here, do you? But you have a. No, wait a minute. Oh, here. You have blue and black. So you find blue and black is the same as a yellow, right? So you've changed this to a yellow, one single yellow. So you have a yellow and a red. So, and they build and they get more complicated, and there'll be more parts down here. So that's deductive reasoning. Here's the rule. Now can you solve the problem? So that's deductive. And the AJT's got some tests that they're not the same as this, but it works kind of. It's with shapes also. It does it. Oh yeah, then you get this. We'll see how smart you are. Okay, smarty pants. How about this one right there? And I haven't, given you the chance to experiment. So what do you think is the answer there? And think about what you're doing when you're doing it. I don't know the answer. I know what it is. How many think it's yellow? Okay, you're right. Because red with the blue is the same as a black, so I've turned this into black here, one black. And yellow with a blue, oh, yeah, there it is, it's blue. So I have a black and a blue, black and blue is yellow. So they get more, that's the kind of idea. And the AJT's got a test somewhat like this, but it's a little bit different. But it's deductive reasoning. Okay, this is inductive reasoning without numbers. And then we'll be taking a break here. And you start with, you basically start with, you have to train people saying, we're going to do some problems, and the problems are solved by color, number, size, and shape. And you train, and you go through a training. You have to train until you understand that. And then you'd say, what is the rule for a drawing to be inside a box? You got one outside the box and one inside the box. And there's 4 dimensions they differ on: color, size, shape, and quantity. Are they the same color? Okay, so it's not yellow. There's one here, right? Not different. They're both the same size because we have bigger ones. The reason that this one's in the box is it's square. It's a different shape. Okay, so we got that. What's the rule for the drawings to be inside the box here? What's the rule? Why are these in the box and why is this one not? I heard it, two. They're the same color, they're the same shape, they're the same size. The only thing different is one out here is two out here. Okay, let's do this one. And I don't have the answers in front of me, so. Oh, that's a pretty easy one. Let's go through it. Okay, we got a big one here, we got big ones out here. So that can't be size. We got yellow one here and yellow here, so it's not color. They're all circles, so it's not shape. It's quantity. These are singles, or only one. Okay, now, what is the rule for these to be inside the box? Now, I have no idea. I have not solved this problem in a long time. And usually you've gone through a sequence, and to give a test you don't have to know the answers. To give an IQ test, because I'm trying to. And the important thing is think about what you're doing. What are you doing? I don't really care if you get the right answer. What are you doing? What is the answer? And the answers can be, now they get more complex. They can be something or something, something and something. You've taught the person this, so there can be an or or an and in there. I don't know if I can solve this one. Okay, we're not going to solve it. I jumped far ahead. But you can see they get very hard. But what I want you to, you were testing out hypotheses. Is it this rule? No. Is it this rule? And actually this one it can be color and quantity. It has to be yellow or two. So there's this, you've taught somebody how to do this on more simple ones. So you're basically trying out hypotheses and trying out rules and principles to solve a new problem you've never seen before. And this is the essence of induction. And some people, and some research suggests it's a little bit different than the quantitative reasoning stuff, that this is the essence of fluid intelligence. Induction is the essence of fluid intelligence. If you had to take one test to measure fluid intelligence, it should be an inductive reasoning where the person does not know the rules. They have to solve the rules and then apply them. That's the highest level of fluid intelligence. So that, I think, brings us to the break time. So you've now seen GC and GF and the AJT. Have I shown an AJT? Yeah, I did show an AJT slide. We have 3 GF tests. One measures induction, one measures deduction or general sequential reasoning, and one measures quantitative reasoning. Got them all. And trust me, they're hard. They're easy ones for young kids are easy, but then they get harder. So I think I'll stop there because then we'll just keep going through. I'm not an intervention person, okay? I'm a measurement person, and they've got Dr. Mascalo who's doing the intervention work and putting together materials. She's an interventionist, but the general approach to using these kind of tests in schools, and I did this for 12 years, was you find out what the person's strengths and weaknesses are, and a lot of times you can't change the weakness. In fact, we've learned that certain abilities, like fluid intelligence, is hard to change. You really can't change it that much. So if you've got somebody who's very weak with this, you try to use their strengths to work around it, to compensate. You might teach, if something requires a high level, because this is very abstract reasoning, you may have to use you know, real world examples, concrete manipulatives, teaching logic with pieces of squares and circles and things, and using real world examples. And if a person's got good verbal skills but poor language, you might teach them how to solve problems by you verbalizing and modeling how to do it, so they can tell them to talk it through. Sometimes you can work around it by teaching. There are visual spatial strategies. You could make these problems into visual problems with things and move some visual things around. So it's more to you recognize their weaknesses and work around them with their strengths. Now there are, I mean, in fact, I think Dr. Mascalo talks about what's called the MARC model. You take the assessment results and you can do different things. One, you can modify the materials, modify the curriculum, give them a different task, same problem but make it more simple. That's modifying the curriculum. Accommodation, I don't know if there'd be an accommodation here. Remediation, you try to remediate the deficit. Fluid reasoning is hard to remediate. Or compensation. I'd say compensation or modification would be the two biggest ones for this. You modify the materials, make the problems more concrete, real world, dealing with lower level, not high level concepts, and you try to work around by using your strengths. Now, that's just a principle. Abby, I think that Jennifer's putting together some webinars on, she's an instructional person. She'd be the one to talk to you. It's not me. But that's the idea. You can't, just because somebody's got a deficit doesn't mean you can fix it. Sometimes there's some areas that you can. You can maybe improve visual spatial abilities through some training. You can improve some auditory abilities through training. You can make working memory more efficient, but fluid is really hard. We've been trying to change it for over 100 years, and there's a lot of new brain fitness programs out there that are trying to change this.
Almost similar, that fluid intelligence only been assessed through abstract figures. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's reflects the logical philosophy, like syllogism and so on. Mm-hmm. So I haven't yet seen fluid intelligence is assessed by also verbal.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are three types of fluid intelligence tests that have been developed in the world, and there are those that are based on visual or figures like this, and that's the traditional way. There are some verbal ones, and then there are quantitative ones. And the verbal ones, some people do use analogies. Mother is to father, as sister is to. So you got to know the rule. The problem is it gets a little GC or verbal gets in there. But we in Woodcock-Johnson have had some tests where we do it with verbal analogies. Some people use metaphors. Metaphors and syllogisms. I don't know what these things are myself. Metaphors, syllogisms and stuff. There are some tests like that. The Stanford Binet 5 has got some verbal GF tests, but I can't remember what they are right now. Yeah. But most of the time it's done this way, and some people don't do well with the visual figural, so it would be ideal if you had verbal ones. The ideal intelligence test would have all three flavors of types of stimuli, but you're trying to measure three different abilities. If you measure each one 3 ways, that's 9 tests. So you kind of make a trade-off. So on the AJT, we use 3 different narrow abilities. 2 of them use visual and figural, 1 use numbers, but we don't have any verbal ones. They're harder to make because language tends to get in there. That's why people go with these. Yeah, that's very good. I think we're supposed to break now for how long? For 1 hour? Okay. And we have plenty of time this afternoon. I mean, I got 6 more abilities to go through, and I don't know if it'll take 2 hours. And if not, I'll go back to a couple slides I skipped, and then I'll just sing and dance or whatever. So, and we'll have a more maybe lengthy question and answer at the end, where Abhi and I sit up here, and you can just kind of grill us on everything. Right? Okay. measure. The AJT has got some tests of closure ability on it. I don't know if the KABC's got some closure tests. The old KABC, I don't know if the new one does, but there's not too many tests that have closure tests ability on it. So the AJT has got visualization, it's got visual memory we went through, and it's got closure ability on it. Okay, I'm not sure what this one does here. Oh yeah, I know. You got to be ready for this one. Okay, yeah. Okay, it's basically, you know, the person, these are not actual test items, they're made up by my colleague, Dr. Joel Schneider. And they're not supposed to come out at the end there, I tell you. That's called, I gotta remember what that's called. It's called serial perceptual integration, or PI. So you got a little quick look at something and you have to figure it out. So that's another aspect of visual and how you would measure it. So there's all kinds of way of measuring visual spatial abilities. You know, you can also have, there are tests like this for more complicated for adults and such, where you have to, where it's a series of mazes strung together. Now that would give you a headache. Look at that. Okay, that's spatial scanning. Okay, now here, look at this pattern in each row and point to the figures that include the figure. As you can see, it's that one, right? That includes it, and it's in there too. This is called flexibility of closure. So that's a little bit different, and the AJT does it a lot different than this, but we have a test that gets at the flexibility of closure also. Look, okay. Other ways to measure visual spatial are with blocks. This is from the Kaufman Adult Intelligence Test. Look at this design. You show it to somebody for 5 seconds, and then you give them blocks and they have to reproduce it. So if that's a memory task, it's visual memory. You know, and they get tougher. So what I'm just trying to show you is that in terms of GV, that includes a wide range of abilities. Visualization is the most important one. That's being able to rotate things in your head and kind of transform things. And then there's visual memory, there's closure ability and flexibility of closure, and imagery is an ability to imagine things visually. We don't have good tests of that though right now. So if somebody wants to develop some, that would be a really good thing to do, how to do visual imagery. Any questions on GV? This is, the Wechslers measure this very well. We have 3 tests or 4 tests of this. What, closure? We have 4 tests. There are 4 tests on the AJT that measure GV. One is a visual memory, an extremely complex visual memory task, not like the one I showed you with the pictures of the dolls. It's of complex visual shapes. Be easy for young kids, and then they get really hard for the adults, or the young adults. We have a visualization test, which is rotating those blocks kind of thing. And there's a closure speed ability and a flexibility closure test. So there's 4 tests on the AJT measuring 4 narrow abilities under GV. Okay, 136. Any questions on GV? I think we're all getting a little tired. I can see everybody getting yawning and that kind of stuff. Any questions, arguments, debates you want to get into? Okay. Let's go to learning efficiency. This is when I mentioned earlier that GLR had been split. Now this is one of the things. This is ability to learn. Well, let me show where. Okay, I gotta make sure I do this right. Okay, just listen. 3, apple. 6 tree, 9 man, 1 light. Now tell me the second and third number. Second and third number, I said. Oh. No, not that second and third number. Okay. Somebody got it right. Okay. That is even harder to do, right? Why was that harder than when I said say the numbers backwards? Well, there were words in there. You didn't know what you were going to do till I told you. I made it more difficult by just saying a bunch of stuff, and then I told you what you had to do with it. So you were over here juggling, keeping the things in order, and then I gave you instruction, and you're basically having to keep that instruction going, and then pull it off. That's a very complex working memory task. So you're doing a lot of stuff in here, and you really keep, when you're doing it, you can't do much without anything else. And that's the AJT has got memory span tests, the simple, say these numbers, say these numbers backwards. And then it's got some complex working memory that really taxes your ability to do a couple things. Remember stuff, that's memory span. Focus your attention, not pay attention to me doing funny things or other stuff going on in the room. That's controlling your attention. And then you know, kind of doing mental juggling. And that's the essence of working memory, is when you really tax the system and require somebody to really focus and do mental juggling. Now, I hadn't planned to do this, but I want to because I think you guys would like it if I do it. I gotta find it here. Oh, different. Okay. See, I'm searching my fishing net of knowledge of how I've organized my hard drive. It's right here. Okay, I gotta sort these by. Oops, no. I know that I've got stuff organized a certain way. Okay. I know I have it here somewhere. Some numbers and then some animals, and I said, but now just tell me the second two. So what happened is, your working memory, I gave you things like this. Okay, and you had to keep them all bouncing. You had to keep them all juggled because you didn't know what I was going to tell you to do. Then I brought in the instruction, and now I'm really taxing your working memory. And then you had to pick off and just give me a couple of things like that. And so, and for you to, so stuff comes through working memory when you're learning. And as you can see, to get it into long-term memory through GL or retrieve it, it has to go through here. It has to go through here. So, and for you to think about or reason or do GF tasks, a problem, to do fluid reasoning, you do your fluid reasoning within this limited workspace. So this is the bottleneck of learning, that if your working memory does not work well, you're going to have problems. That's why GWM is so important. And to make a more complex figure here, information comes in, it goes through the different senses, visual abilities, auditory, and there's other ones. And everything goes through this working memory area, which involves what's called executive functions. You have to focus on something, so you have to work on it. In fact, you're doing that right now. You're trying to work on it to try to get it down here, to get something stored into your cloud system. you know, like cloud computing. You put stuff up on the web. You're trying to get stuff stored down here, and later on you're going to try to retrieve it. But when you retrieve it, it has to come through working memory also before you can respond by saying something or doing something. So GWM is in the middle of all learning. It's right in the middle. You know, your visual, spatial abilities are not going to be good if your working memory is not good. Your auditory is not going to be good, which I haven't gone through today. Your reasoning is not going to be good if you don't have good working memory. So working memory is the bottleneck of learning, and that's why it's one of the most important abilities in the CHC model in terms of learning. Okay. Questions on that? I mean, that's how we measure it. We just make very simple tasks more complex, where we just basically try to tax the person's mental workspace as much as we can to see what their capacity is and what strategies they can use to remember stuff. And on the AJT, we have got repeating letters backwards. That's one test. We've got arranging words, remembering the pictures, like picture arrangement on the Wexler. They're pictures of objects, and then you take them away and they have to put them back in the right order again. And we've also got complex working memory, which is kind of the one I did with you, where I was making the juggling thing, where you have to really do a lot of stuff in here to be able to do it. So, what time have I got? 2:18. Good. I didn't go through auditory abilities, and I'm not going to show any tests because I don't have any to show. But they're in the auditory area, there are different abilities. And one of the abilities is the ability to hear sounds when there's distracting noise going on, like in a classroom or in a school. So the AJT's got some tests that we call auditory attention. And we don't put it into the full-scale IQ, the default IQ, because it might be measuring more attention than anything. But it's listening to like two words, very simple words. Cat, cat, same or different. Cat, fat, same or different. Very easy. It starts off that way, and then as I should have Abhi come up here and do it with me. Erb's done it with me before, where eventually we start to introduce background noise. And then they hear cat and fat with that background noise going on. And then it gets louder, and at the end it's not that bad, but and it's like washing machine noise turned backwards, and we increase the volume. So a person, is how good can somebody hear the differences between words as the noise behind it gets louder and louder and louder. And people differ on that, especially as you get older. A lot of older people tend to have trouble hearing in large groups. Some children have difficulty with this. It shows they have difficulty with some very subtle problems with auditory functioning, that they can't hear sounds or words or information when there's background noise. So we have a test of that. And we also have one called memory for sound patterns. It's what's your memory for sound patterns of sounds? And I'm sorry, but you're going to have to. I'm going to make two sound sequences of sounds, and you tell me if they're the same or different. Okay, don't laugh at me. Okay, that's kind of hard because I have to remember myself. But there are sounds made from a sound synthesizer, and there's no language involved, and they get very long. And so it gets at kind of like working memory for sounds. And so we have those two tests on the AJT, two auditory tests. We're not sure how they're going to work in Indonesia and what they're going to relate to, but according to CHC theory, they're important. In the United States, sound tests are very important because a lot of our kids don't learn to read well because we got a bad language system. The correspondence between our letters and sounds is very funny. So if kids have trouble with sounds, they don't do well. But I'm very interested in how these two tests are going to do. I think especially the memory for sound patterns might be extremely important. I think the auditory tests in general might be very important for, well, the auditory attention one for finding kids who've got problems listening in classrooms when there's noise going on. They might need a special place to, or wear headphones or be in a cubicle or special place where there's not a lot of noise. These tests might be important for music. They might be, because auditory is very important for learning music, musical abilities. I think I said that earlier, didn't I? Today? I'm forgetting. I've been talking about this stuff for like, I don't know how many days now. So, that's within one day, 100 years of, started with intelligence being one thing. I'm going to show you a video to summarize all this. Then Bobby's going to come up and help me out with questions. And we've been studying intelligence, and there are different. Oh, well, I should show one slide. Nah, I won't. If a question comes up, I'll answer it. We've learned a lot about this. What are the basic elements from a psychometric theoretical point of view? Not a Vygotskian point of view, not a Piaget point of view, not a Luria from neuropsychology from Russia point of view. Those are valid theories, not an information processing point of view. Those are all valid ways of looking at intelligence. They're all important. I'm just talking about psychometric, which means understanding intelligence based upon what we can measure. And then we factor analyze it and relate it to brain function, school learning. The other ones we don't deal with because I think I said earlier, we don't care how good a child can smell, the olfactory ability. Although it's interesting, I don't know if you've heard of this research, what they're finding out, one of the first early warning signs of Alzheimer's is this loss of smell. And it's actually been associated with a lot of neurocognitive decline, loss of smell sensitivity. So measuring GO might be important in the elderly. So we've come to the CHC model as the best current understanding of what are the major building blocks of intelligence, with maybe a G at the top. Some of us agree or don't agree there's such a thing. But there are these broad ability areas, and then underneath there are narrow ability areas. And that seems to be the consensus model. And different people are developing or revising intelligence tests to measure that model the best they can now. And the AJT was started with the CHC model as its blueprint. So the architects would say, okay, we got to measure this is a narrow ability, how do we do it? And we went through some sample tests like that. So that's basically how the AJT came about in terms of its development, its use. I know you're an educator, you keep asking me educational questions, and I used to be in the schools, but translating this to intervention and what do you do about kids is the next stage. And Abby's working with somebody I know quite well in the United States named, yeah, I know very well, but I can't, my GR is getting bad. I'm searching my net. Jennifer Muscalo. It's working on the intervention part. So, with that.
CHC model. The CHC model is now widely accepted as being the most accurate description of human cognitive abilities. The CHC model is the best working taxonomy of human intelligence. Each student has a unique landscape or terrain of cognitive mountains and valleys. Individual intelligence testing recognizes these differences and can help identify how children can learn most effectively. The Dharma Brahmagna Foundation, or YDB, focuses on measuring 7 CHC cognitive domains and has developed the AJT cognitive test to assess the cognitive landscape of Indonesian students aged 5 to 18 years old. The 7 cognitive domains are verbal comprehension or GC, fluid reasoning or GF, short-term working memory or GWRM, long-term retrieval or GLR, visual spatial processing or GV, auditory processing or GA, and processing speed or GS. GC for verbal comprehension, for example, is to what degree a student has learned practically useful knowledge of language, vocabulary, information, and culturally specific concepts. GF for fluid reasoning is the deliberate but flexible control of attention to solve novel or unique on-the-spot problems that cannot be solved by relying exclusively on previously learned habits or mental operations. GWRM for short-term working memory is the ability to encode, maintain, and manipulate information in one's immediate awareness while avoiding distractions. It is the mind's mental scratchpad. For example, maintaining a new phone number in active memory long enough to dial the number. GLR for long-term retrieval is for information stored and retrieved over periods of time. For example, fluency in remembering unrelated information. GV for visual spatial processing is the ability to mentally transform and manipulate 2D and 3D visual images. GA for auditory processing is the ability to detect and process meaningful nonverbal information in sound. GS for processing speed is the ability to perform both simple and complex repetitive cognitive tasks quickly and fluently while maintaining attention. For example, comparing visual patterns. The results of an AJT cognitive test provides data for the teacher and an AJT certified psychologist to develop an individualized education program or IEP. If the AJT CogTest identifies the student is strong in visual spatial processing GV and struggles with processing speed GS, then schoolwork can be customized by emphasizing visual spatial approaches to learning and making accommodations or modifications to account for the student's slower thinking speed. Better understanding the 7 cognitive domains and using the AJT CogTest helps teachers use their time more efficiently to develop more effective in-class learning activities for their students. Teachers will learn to understand the cognitive landscape of their students, and students become more engaged in achieving their personal and academic goals.
There. Now you know that
The question isn't how.
Here AJT says it covers the auditory processing, and under it there is phonetic coding. Do we also assess it? Because I believe in Indonesia we are not taught to do phonetic.
Okay. Phonetic coding is the ability to hear. When I first came to Indonesia and did the first presentation, everybody in the room kind of shook their head about we don't need to measure GA. And in the United States, GA, especially phonetic coding, is probably one of the most important abilities for reading because our kids have trouble with sounds because of our sound language system. And the decision was made not to develop a test because we didn't think it was going to be that important. Are you saying you think maybe we made a mistake, or which is fine because?
No, I'm saying that in Indonesia we are the children is not taught to do phonetic coding. So
we're not measuring it because we didn't think it was that important. And that's where I had to learn from people in your country and experts that we don't really need to measure that. So we didn't do that. Yeah. And that's the whole thing about when you develop a test, you have a taxonomy of abilities, and you go, okay, which one should we measure? Well, the answer seems to be a bit different depending on the country you're in. And we decided phonetic coding wasn't worth it. In the United States, we have entire special batteries on phonetic coding to measure different little parts of it, because our kids struggle with reading because our language is, that's a mess. Well, it is. Yeah, so that's a part of the decision making that was gone about. Good, thank you.
Sorry, it's me. Well, aside from researching about test reliability, which I hope it's been done with this AJT, but I'm asking whether or how is the repeatability of this instrument, meaning that because in the beginning you said that this instrument will provide a map of cognitive abilities, and then you think about EIP and all. So my thought that this instrument could also be used repeatedly. Is that true? And if it's so, then how's the repeatability or you know the property of?
Okay. Well, yeah. The psychometric property of reliability. That is, if those aren't in the reliability group. How much? Okay. Well, first of all, this is a type of test that should not be given repeatedly. An intelligence test like this should only be given at most twice a year, at most. Because you don't want people to start to get familiar with the test items, because then you get what's called a practice effect and their scores go up. Not because their abilities went up, they just get familiar and adopt the strategies. Well, at the most. At the most. In fact, I would say once a year at the most. Once a year. Because you don't want to have a practice effect. Now, the reliabilities is we used extensive use of what's called Roche scaling. I don't know if you're a psychometrician or not. Where we looked at all the items and we looked at the items for each test, and we made sure that there are enough items to have good reliability. So we haven't computed them yet, but I know based on experience about how we did this and how the psychometricians work with it, that the reliabilities for the individual tests, subtests, will be in the 0.8s, maybe the low 0.9s. When you test together into clusters, the GF cluster, which is 2 tests, or the GC cluster, which is 2 tests, reliability for sure will be in the 0.9s once you put 2 together. And then the full scale IQ will be in the mid 0.95s and above. I just know from my experience. We haven't computed them yet, but the way we worked on in fact, we did item analysis, I think quarter of the way through, then halfway through. We looked at it and said, oh, we need more items here because we can't measure reliability. We went out and gathered more data. I'm pretty sure the reliabilities, they'll be equal to or better than what's available from other tests. I can assure you that. But you don't want to be, this is not the type of test where you give somebody and do something and give it to them again. That's kind of the rule in the United States too. You don't give an intelligence test more than once a year. Sometimes in maybe clinical settings, like in neuropsychology settings, they might give it a couple of times. Then you have to account for scores going up that really don't reflect abilities going up. It's just they get familiar with the items.
I noticed there's a lot of item or construct that is similar to Wechsler. In Wechsler, in my experiences, I can diagnose precisely because I get information more about the working attitude, about the emotional status, condition of the client, gitu. Plus, yes, I get the cognitive side also. Can we do that with AJT? That we can get information about the emotional condition of the client?
I need to ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah.
You get it, we just talked about this yesterday. How do you get the emotional information from the Wechsler?
By qualitative, like in observation, like in how the client do that, inductive or reasoning, or just no pattern of working. I can go deeper than that.
I'm glad you said that answer, because otherwise I'd get into an argument with you. because let me just go back up, because I've been told, and I've learned, you know, there was a period of time in psychology in the United States where intelligence tests, where people would take the Wechsler and say, well, if they're high on picture arrangement, low on this, and they gave these kind of answers to this, that means they're schizophrenic. Well, that type of testing has been found, that type of personality testing from intelligence testing has been thoroughly discredited. It doesn't work. But what you're doing is exactly what I did. If you give an intelligence test, it can be the Wechsler, it can be the Binet, it can be the AJT, to hundreds and hundreds of kids over and over and over, you develop clinical norms in your head. You know, you see a kid move blocks, and you see how kids do it. A lot of kids do it the same, and then another one will come like, wow, you know, what are they doing? You develop what I call clinical norms. It's a structured observation. You give everybody the same tasks, same kids, and you tend to learn as a clinician what's typical and what's not. And you learn about cognitive style, you learn about maybe anger, frustration. That stuff is not available right now because we haven't given, clinicians like you haven't given hundreds and hundreds of these yet. So there's no clinical information out there to say, watch for this on this test, watch for these behaviors on this test. That needs to be done. So that stuff is not, that will only come from people like you and other psychologists. We'll give it a lot, and then we'll start pulling it together and say, boy, when you have them do that complex working memory or those fluid reasoning tests, when they get to the about here, you're going to see some stuff about frustration tolerance. We don't have that yet, but you can get that from an intelligence test and it's not the test, it's the psychologist. And I always say the psychologist is the instrument. And so we gathered data in 4,800 subjects, but they weren't they weren't people who gathering those kind of notes. So we don't have that yet. So somebody needs to do that.
That the CAC test design is now global. So I can see from the map, the test has been developed in Brazil, Australia, Turkey, the map you mentioned. Are these tests based on local behavior, like what Pak Abi did in Indonesia, or it's originally from US and adapted there? Because I'm wondering whether I want to compare to identify whether this test is unique for Indonesians. I need to cross-culturally test it. So if those tests in Brazil, in Australia, also built in local context, so I don't think that I can compare them. So I cannot find whether this test is unique for Indonesia or universal also. There are dimensions, universal and unique for Indonesia.
The stuff in Europe, basically most of it, not all, but most of it has been Dr. Woodcock Foundation. He sponsored research in Romania, Slovakia, and other places. Take the Woodcock-Johnson third edition, translated, and gathered norm data in those countries. So it's still a US-based test, adapted, kind of like people done with the Wechsler, brought them over, adapted the items, and then gathered data here. So those are kind of not perfect CAC things. There are people in the Netherlands, though, who've developed CAC tests and complete batteries from scratch to match their culture and be normed in their country. In Brazil, they've done a little of everything. They're kind of all over the place. They're kind of fun people. They first started with taking our Woodcock-Johnson and adapting and translating it and using it there. And they basically found that there were too many issues with doing that. So now they're doing more developing their own tests, but they're not developing a comprehensive battery. They're measuring a fluid intelligence and visual and something else, but they're using CHC to define those. So they're developing more limited batteries. Australia, it's somewhat similar to the United States in terms of we both came from our ties to the UK. The publisher there took the Woodcock-Johnson third and fourth and it's adapted and renormed it there, and we find it translates very well. We find the same structure. So I'm not sure. That's what was really going on. Comparing how kids do on the AJT with other cultures, that's, I don't know how, I don't do cross-cultural research. I admit how I'm weak. When John Carroll did his 1993 book on This is the Structure of Intelligence, he did look at what was available to him at that time, which now seems like a long time ago, 1993. And he said, by and large, these major domains seem to exist across the culture.
Okay.
But whether which abilities are more important, we talk about that, might be different.
Probably the best research we can do now is research. Well, we can find some research in those cultures, then we can analyze it in meta-analytical, I guess.
AJT is just coming out. It's taken 4 years. All of other research that has built up on intelligence testing needs to be done now. And so we don't have the answers. We can take what we know from a ton of CHC research in the United States and say, here's what we know, start from there. But there's a lot that needs to be done. If any of you want to do research or dissertations or something, there's a lot of possibilities.
Needs. Yeah, if the client is bad on, let's say, GC, so we give more about that construct. Yeah. Except the characteristic of the client needs, is there any other pertimbangan, consideration in should I give more of this construct, I pull out this construct, is there any other pakem, guidelines about giving or holding a certain construct?
27 tested people. I mean, that's like 6 hours testing. And the test, I didn't get through it today, it's practically, and I'll get to your question, but I'm a psychologist. Psychologists always give long answers. The idea is you start with one test of GF, one test of GC, one test of GA, and you measure one of everything. And then from there, you get the overall IQ score or ability score. And then based upon what's the presenting problem, what the teacher is telling you the child's problem is, if they just can't remember anything from day to day, I teach them and they doesn't remember. That should tell you as a psychologist, I need to maybe look at working memory and maybe GL and GR more. So I might go and give test 2 of each of those areas. And necessary test 3 to really dig down to find out how pervasive is the problem in learning efficiency or retrieval or working memory. And basically at each time you give more, you find out more. And eventually if you're not finding the second test says, oh no, this is fine, maybe that first test was there's some error in it. There are no really guidelines. The professional psychologist has to kind of know the instruments well and know what they're finding and use what I call collateral information. What is the teacher saying? What is the parent saying about? And if you're a good psychologist, you can hear, you can listen and say, gee, whenever you hear something is comprehension, it just doesn't comprehend. So read and help. Whenever I hear the word comprehension, I think GF and GC right away. So it's how far to keep going is almost like go one step further, gather more information, get other sources of information from the school records and how the child does, what people are saying, continue on. But no formal really guidelines at this stage. It's called intelligence testing. There are some books that talk about how to do this, especially like Alan Cox.
You have to do anamnesis with the client.
Well, what I used to do is I never wanted to see a client. I worked in the schools, and before, especially as the classroom teachers, they see the kid every day learning or not. And I would ask them questions. I would have the CHC model in my head, and I'd say, well, first of all, tell me what's the problem. Then I keep probing. If they said something that said to me, So like I gave you some sample behaviors, and we say, oh, it's like processing speed. So it asks some more questions about how fast are they always late? Do they struggle getting? And I'd get as much information as I could to develop some hypotheses about. Well, this child doesn't seem to have a problem with the reasoning. That doesn't, does well in math. He's doing word problems. What I'm hearing is bad grades in this and bad behavior, bad things here. That's telling me that I'll give the beginning, I'll give one of everything, but I'm going to focus maybe working memory or processing speed the most right away.
Okay, thank you.
But it's you obviously are a person who tests people, and you develop those skills over time. If you're in a private practice, or sometimes you don't have that information, and you have to start from scratch.
Yeah, your answer, mine. I presume that this test is not primarily targeted to special needs students, right? It's for general population.
Well,
right?
It's national normed on a representative sample of children in Indonesia.
Right.
In the United States, we have tests like that, and we use them to identify kids with learning disabilities because they're below average to identify the learning patterns of students who have learning problems.
Yeah. Okay. My question then, if it's to identify problems in special needs children or children having difficulties in the classroom, then you start with information from the teachers and so on and so on, like your answer just now. But what if we want to do it for the general population? Would you start only with the GF and GC only, or what would you suggest us to?
You mean like you want to see somebody give a little more short assessment, screening?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't go through this. We went through yesterday. The AJT is going to have a full scale IQ based on 7 abilities, no GA, because then it'll have a full scale IQ based on 8. You want to put GA in. There is going to be a brief IQ score based on 4 abilities. We pick the ones that we think are the most relevant for general intelligence. GF, fluid reasoning, GC or verbal, working memory, visual spatial. If I had to, that's just the formal reason. If you're trying to say, I don't have that kind of time, I wanted to take 2 tests, you take GF and GC. And if you want to take 3, in my opinion, take GF, fluid reasoning, GC, comprehension, working memory. If you have to take just 1, you take a fluid reasoning test. It all depends on how much time. So the test is, it's like a toolbox. You take the first 2, there might be some certain tools in there that if you have to do some mass screening, those are the ones I start with. As I said before, I would have told my mother that I would be off in Indonesia talking about intelligence theory when I was starting college. She was just yeah, sure, Kevin. I don't know how I ended up here, but I love what I do. I'm extremely thankful to YDP that they all got a hold of me and they like me. And I really believe in what the Tahiyas are trying to do. I've met the Tahiyas many times, and their mission, to improve education. To improve the education of kids with special needs in particular, and also those with gifted, who sometimes are ignored. We didn't talk about the gifted, but it's really important to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Give a big applause for Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. This is very challenging for us. Ya, terima kasih Bapak Ibu sekalian sudah bertahan sampai dengan sore hari ini. Ini adalah akhir dari sesi seminar kita. Terima kasih sudah hadir. Sertifikat nanti akan diberikan, dikirim ke tempat karena ada tanda tangan dari HIMSI, Jaya, dari Pak Widura. Tapi Pak Widura belum bisa hadir, jadi kami akan mengirimkan. Ya, nanti akan dikirim ke alamat masing-masing. Tadi kalau diminta menuliskan alamatnya, Sudah? Alamat email, iya. Nanti kalau bisa dituliskan alamat yang bisa dikirim sertifikatnya. Kami ada kenang-kenangan. Kevin, we have souvenir for you.
Mungkin pesan-pesannya untuk ke depan lebih semoga semakin mantap dengan teori-teorinya, dengan AJT juga semakin sukses, semakin cepat selesai dan launching supaya bisa berguna untuk Indonesia. Itu aja. Terima kasih.